Welcome everyone to second edition of London Dialogues. And today we have with us Vivek Agnihotri, filmmaker, author, political commentator, and how he would like everyone to believe in themselves, a Buddha. Welcome Vivek.
Thank you.
Really nice having you today here. So the topic today that we are addressing is the stories that we don't tell. So we are going to explore some set systems and how, if there are any kind of narratives that we are discouraged to explore or discouraged to tell. Before I jump into that topic, Vivek, I would want to hear from you your journey, first into filmmaking, and second from filmmaking to Buddha.
First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me, for two reasons. London is one of my favorite cities. In fact, I always say that is my first city where I was never got a chance to live.
But if I believe you shot your first movie also here, right?
Yeah, first two movies, actually, both Chocolate and Goal, I shot there. In fact, in Goal, I got stuck there for some technical reasons. So I spent 6 to 9 months there non-stop. I was staying in one apartment in St. James Court Hotel, and so I got stuck in the apartment alone in the winter of... But besides that, I always make sure to stop by at London, spend a lot of time with great friends. So that is one reason why I'm so delighted to be here. And second is, it is Indic Academy, and Indic Academy is like, we are very close to each other. We work a lot with each other. We have same objective, and I'm happy to be with this London Dialogues. It's a great initiative.
Thank you.
So journey, I don't know. See, I'll tell you what, I'm not one of those typical people, So, like I'll tell you, when I came to the film industry, everybody I used to meet, they always talk about their struggle a lot. जब मैं पेशावर से आया था, तो मेरे जेब में 100 रुपए थे, फिर मैं स्टेशन पे सोया, मैंने ये किया. मैंने भी वो सब किया है. I mean, but I don't know why, because I'm a small town, middle class upbringing kind of a person. So to me, those things were not unusual things, They were they were not something which are highlights of my life, and this is something I don't even remember. Now, since you asked me, I remember when I came to Bombay, I was living in Pali Hill, and I used to have, for 10 rupees, I would get some 12 Golgappas, and that I made sure that was my dinner because I didn't have much money. But now these things don't matter. As far as journey is concerned, for me, the psychological journey is more important than the physical journey, What's the point of making all these kind of physical journeys, and in the end, you die as somebody unfulfilled and without finding the purpose of your life? So for me, it's the psychological journey which is very important. Your question was, what has been your journey from filmmaking to Buddha? So,
actually, I'm asking that question with being conscious that filmmaking has not been left behind. Right. So it's not that you have traveled from there. Your filmmaking with you has traveled towards Buddha.
But actually, I don't know, subconsciously, or I don't know how, in a very surreal manner, you asked a question which has actually made me introspect, and it's a brilliant question because honestly, I tell you, I left filmmaking. I don't make films anymore.
This is something, right?
I mean, it's very difficult for people to understand this. I was making films earlier, and Chocolate, Goal, all those films which I made were, obviously, they were movies. They were movies because they were made with the intent of going to the box office and recovering money. So commercially, they were films. Second thing, the stories which were chosen were what people wanted to see. Today, you are not going to make a product which nobody wants to buy. Certainly, you are not going to do that. People are not even willing to write a tweet which is not going to go popular. So forget about the movies. So in that way, obviously, the movies I was making were made with the intention what people wanted to see and hear. Kya chalega market? And third thing was that I was using all the possible crutches and ingredients which are required to make a movie, like film stars, big locations, popular subjects, music, action, all kinds of ingredients I was putting into them. So, of course, 100% intent was to make movies for consumption.
Right.
And they were catering primarily to a certain target audience. At times, they were also playing to the gallery. But what happened was that one big film I was doing with a big star, and what I realized was that somehow in this system, your movie is as big or as small as the star is. So today, if star is here, your movie is there. If star goes down, your movie goes down. So you are so dependent on the star and not on the content, not on the subject. And second thing is, what you are delivering is not your voice. What you are saying is not your voice. You are playing to the gallery. You are saying what people want to hear. So it's for the modern millennial digital generation, to make it very simple, like on Twitter and Instagram, you are not putting your face out there. You are putting a face which you think will get more likes or more will go viral. You are tweeting what is not your true nature, but you are tweeting what you think people will forward more or retweet more. So the truth never comes out. So once I realized that, and I also was at a point of time in life when I didn't have fear to lose anything, and I quit Bollywood, and I started teaching, doing seminars, and 2 years of unemployment actually. And in that process, when I was at Indian School of Business, I was doing a workshop, and the workshop was called I Am Buddha. But I Am Buddha there meant about leadership, and in management. And that's where what I was seeking, I found, which was total independence, freedom to tell my story. So when I made this film, Buddha in a Traffic Jam, which had all the ingredients, what shouldn't be there in the recipe. For example, you shouldn't blame Naxals. You shouldn't blame professors or teachers. You cannot make a film without any stars. You cannot make a film without any drama or comedy or action. It had nothing. In fact, it was not like a film. It was in 10 chapters. There were 10
chapters,
different chapters. Yeah, different chapters, and totally non-linear. They had no connection with each other. And you had to apply a lot of mind to understand. And it was very verbose. People were talking all the times, and they were talking very serious issues. In fact, they were discussing the kind of politics which nobody is interested in. They were talking about the concepts of communism, socialism, etc., So everything was no in that film. So obviously, when the film was seen by the distributors, producers, a lot of people felt threatened. A lot of people were against it. A lot of people said, what shit you have made. So I was for 6 years sitting with that film, doing nothing and totally unemployed. And when life becomes totally dark and you don't know where to go. And that's when the realization happened, actually. And Nilendra, I'm telling you very honestly, I've said it many times. That's when the realization happened. I remember the day it was gloomy, dark, raining. In Bombay, when it rains, it gets very dark. It was one of those times. And then I said, why am I depending on others? It is my thought, my idea, my story. Then I can do anything I want to do with this. So in that flash of a moment, I forgot it was a film. I said, it's a story. It's a story which I have to take to people. And that's when I decided to take it door to door in all the colleges and universities. Then rest is history. I applied to JNU, they rejected, and now things happened. And then the universe conspired to make it happen. And since then, I never made a film. I'm just telling stories in books, in speeches, in camera or whatever,
Right. So that very film, The Buddha in a Traffic Jam, actually triggered the topic that I want to discuss with you. Is that so the stories that we don't tell is a thought process that I started thinking on after watching that movie. And I'll contextualize the question, but let me first put the question out. The question is there an unsaid code of silence when it comes to certain kind of narratives in Hindi filmmaking, especially political, religious, social, right? That you cannot broach some topics or you cannot show some angles, right? And let me contextualize it in frame of that movie. So we have had movies which talked about militancy. Essentially, two perspectives. One, either it romanticizes the militancy and violence, or it shows the bravado of the security forces that how effectively they have curbed the violence, right?
Yeah.
But in both perspectives, somehow as an audience, this whole thing that was happening with violence was in a distant place. The story tells about a place where you as an audience have no relationship with. What your movie did was that it bought that whole environment right next to my college seat. Right. As a student, I would think that the person sitting next to me can also be a part of Nexus. The story was then became very real for everyone who's watching in a city. It's not happening somewhere in Bastar or in a remote place in Andhra or in Odisha or in Bengal. It could be in Delhi. It could be in Bombay, right? So, and that perspective is generally not told, even if you make it broader and you look at other kind of movies which made in politics or the stories, the way narratives are done. They are all the actual events are a backdrop. They are not really being discussed, nuance are not being put out. So do you think there is a unsaid code of silence on these kind of narratives?
I wouldn't call it unsaid. I would say it is very well written constitution, and we are fighting against that constitution, and this constitution is a narrative constitution, and it
Mm-hmm.
was written first it was written by Mughals, and then it was written by Britishers, and then it was written by independent India. And that constitution is as simple as this, that uh, when education, art, literature, and culture, okay, these are the four, broadly speaking, and media, broadly speaking, construct the narrative of a society.
Right.
So academics, media, art, culture, and literature. And slowly these are codings. If I'm a say 7 8 year old child, and if I see plays, or I do plays in my school, which talk a lot about, say, Akbar the Great. So in my mind, somewhere subconsciously, there will be a coding that greatness is associated to Akbar.
Yeah.
Then everything related to Akbar anywhere in the world will remind me of greatness. This is coding. It's a science of communication.
Right. Yeah.
Or Ashoka. So people who grow up thinking that Ram was great, they will find everything associated with Ram. So when you talk about Maryada or values or, things like,
yeah.
So this is coding. Now, coding happens when you are very young. So education is very, very extremely important. Then the second thing is, nobody has patience to listen to long stories. So stories also come to us in forms of dance and songs and music, etc., etc. Like, for example, I'm sorry, I'm elaborating it.
No. So
because it's a very important issue and not many people talk about it in a logical framework.
If I can interrupt you for a second. So I couldn't frame a single question for our discussion. I just could think of broader topics, because the minute I would sit down to frame a question, I would myself start censoring my question out of that can I ask this? Can I raise question on this? Right. So I totally get what you're saying.
So, for example, so this is all coding, which can be done through music, through dance. Just to give you a small example, I have noticed when I came to this film industry, people would say namaste, this, that, God forbid, oh my God, oh Jesus, and all kind of expressions they used to use, with that exclamation. Now in last 7 8 years, I have noticed myself that for everything people say inshallah, mashallah, Allah, Khuda, in general talk outside the screen, off camera, when they talk. Now, why is this happening? I'll tell you how it happens. It happens because when you're stars, you see when Shah Rukh Khan talks, he's always saying, Allah ka shukr hua to yoga, inshallah yoga. And look at your lyrics. The lyrics in movie are always talking about kafir and Allah and Rab and Khuda and these kind of things, So these are codings, and slowly it becomes your jargon. It becomes your language. You must have also noticed that because these modern directors, young directors who have grown up in Bombay, they cannot speak good Hindi.
Right.
They don't know India. So what they have done is, they said, "Arey, hum to bolchal ki bhasha mein likhenge." So they've started using this Hinglish and very Bombaya kind of a language with slangs, etc., etc. And they say
Mm-hmm.
this is cool. No, this is not cool because you do not know the language. That's why you are speaking that language. Nobody in
Right.
this world shies from speaking good language. If you can speak good language, why not speak it? So ये जो
Right.
coding है ना, तो ये पूरा का पूरा जो है communists controlled it, and they controlled it because Jawaharlal Nehru wanted the support of socialists, then Indira Gandhi wanted the support of communists, so it was
Mm-hmm.
bartered to them. In barter, they said to support Congress, we need these things, and that's why if you see, look at all the education ministers of India, you'll find they come from a very strong communist bent of mind. If you look at all these people who have controlled these literary societies, like in Madhya Pradesh,
Right.
Bharat Bhavan was the apex body of art, literature, culture, drama, painting, and everything. It was controlled by Ashok Bajpayee, who's a strong leftist.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
all these Kala academies, this academy, and all those kind of things in India, including CBFC and the National Film Development Corporation. That's why you see all the National Film Development Corporation films
Right.
always were centered around caste discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
They were always centered around class conflict, and they
Mm-hmm.
always portrayed upper caste as villains and the lower caste as always somebody who's victimized. All the films
Right.
supported by NFDC, you will find they glorified terrorists and Naxals and the people who actually
Mm-hmm.
pick up arms to kill people. They always
Right.
showed government servants and police as oppressors. Now, these are template narratives of communists, whether in US or in UK, in China or India. These are templates, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So there was so slowly a written code of conduct, a sort of kind of a constitution came into place, which said that you cannot glorify great Indian values, because in cinema, if you see, it was totally controlled by communists. All the great directors, right from Bimal Roy to Mehboob Khan Saab to you name it, Guru Dutt and everybody, and all the great actors, Valraj Sahni to anybody, all of them came from IPTA. Most of these
Right.
music directors and writers and directors came from Bengal, you know, because cinema was more evolved in Bengal and they had great stories, so they came to Mumbai.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, cinema was always under control of communists. Education was always under control of communists, and which is why we do not, our children, even of my generation, do not know even 2, 3 great names of great Indian kings of great Indian empires, but we know everything about the Mughal Empire. We know everything about Lord Curzon, but we do not know much about our own revolutionaries or whatever. This is
Right.
the problem. We have grown up with communist education, and which is why you will find in Tashkent Files, I have explained in detail how India became a colony of KGB. So
Right.
that's why I was attacked, because I tried to make a film where I exposed the education system and the professors, and how professors in India are recruiting young boys and girls to become
So,
enemies of India.
so that's exactly what I was going to ask you. And I have read your book, Urban Naxal,
Yeah.
which was much demonized when you put that term out there. And so, what happens when you break this code of silence? When you start showing the perspective which is not supposed to be shown. So, when you started going to college to show your, I think you could not distribute your movie through the
Yeah.
traditional channels. And when you started going to campuses, there was a blockade pretty much in every campus. They wouldn't allow you to show the movie, right?
Yeah.
So, and I read your book, and in the book you name a lot of people through your journey. That what happened. So, what was your experience of trying to tell a story which, in your own words, has every kind of nose that shouldn't be told?
See, my first thing was, see, at that time I didn't know much of politics. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
not that I was a novice, but I was not interested in that kind of a politics. I was more like a
Mm-hmm.
political analyst rather than an active participant. So first thing I realized that people were opposing without even knowing what is inside the film. They had not seen the film. They had no idea what was in the film, but they were opposing it because a word had spread that the film is anti-Naxal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in India, anti-Naxal narrative is kind of impossible. Indira Gandhi was attacked by Naxals, but she never spoke against them. Most of the chief ministers suffer from Naxalism, they don't speak against it. Indian prime ministers once here and there spoke against it. In fact, Manmohan Singh spoke against it. He talked about urban nationalism in the parliament. Under his government, the home minister spoke about it. Manmohan Singh's government filed an affidavit in Supreme Court. They used the word urban Maoist. I did not start it.
In fact, that government started one of the largest Operation Green Hunt against the...
Yes, Green Hunt, they started that. You know, so, but openly to the masses, nobody spoke about it. Right. Nobody ever addressed it. Everybody knew that JNU, students are recruited in Jadavpur, JNU, Osmania, all these universities. Nobody spoke about it. All the filmmakers showed them as nice people, good people, messiahs for poor, doing great social work. Even this wonderful film, See Newton, there also they show Naxals as like good people. So when you glorify villains of the society, we have glorified dacoits, we have glorified mafia people, we have glorified terrorists in Kashmir, we have glorified Naxals, we glorify all these people who are basically anti-social elements who are against the state. And this is a communist mindset. It's a communist influence and control over education, media, and art and literature. And which is why you'll find this new generation today, without knowing anything, goes out and supports CAA or the new farmers protest, which is 100% communist and Congress-sponsored protest. It's not a real farmer protest. This is the problem of this country, that we protect the enemies of this country. And which is why India doesn't grow and develop as fast as it should. Because the agenda of communist people is to keep India distracted with these kind of things and do not let it grow and develop. Because India's development, India's rising as a secondary superpower in this region of Asia is a direct threat to Russia and China.
Right.
And this is why they control India and sort of create these hurdles and speed breakers in India's growth through this strong intellectual narrative. And which is why they came after me, because I was entering their territory and I was demolishing their narrative. Which is why you see I'm one of the most trolled person, though 80% of my narrative is around spirituality and creativity, still they troll me because one tweet of mine threatens their entire facade of intellectualism.
Yes, I mean, I will give you that. Two words of yours actually created a furor around and which carried on for years. Urban Naxals, kind of, you made it household word. Everyone knows what to use when they're referring to someone who supports Naxal.
It was unintentional though. But
right. So I'll come to Tashkent Files. So Tashkent Files. So I would understand a big furor around the Buddha and the traffic jam. One could imagine that it would poke into some people. Tashkent File, honestly, would be expected to be a very wanting film. Why would you not want to know what happened to a very loved ex-PM of the country? But that also kind of created a furor. Everyone started. So there were multiple allegations which came in. One is that somehow you're trying to be divisive. To be honest, I don't understand how that movie can be divisive. Second was that you were trying to be an opportunist just to capitalize on the sentiment. Now you're getting into that topic, right? How do you think that movie was a narrative breaking, or is why there is an effective opposition when we try to talk about any political leader or big name? And I've seen that happening with Subhash Chandra Bose also, that whenever you try to put his name out or Sardar Patel's name out, there is an effective opposition. That why are we even talking about these people? So that also narrative break is also there.
Okay, so first I would like to say something I never say, but today I want to say. People have to understand that I'm a very genuine person. My intentions are so genuine, I can't explain it. My heart beats only for India. My heart beats only for the younger generation. And the only reason I'm doing all this and the sacrifices I am making with my career and everything is for the simple reason, because when I was growing up, I always felt that in this country, there is no truth, no justice. And despite knowing it, we don't do anything. And the people who suffer most because of this are the youth, the younger generation. Because when you are when you are 20-year-old man, boy or a girl, you have only 20 years of past, but you have 60, 70 years of future.
True.
And these 60-year-old people who have 60 years of past and just 10 or 20 years of future are not letting these young people imagine and visualize a great country the way they want to. And I always felt suppressed. And since then, and I was so proud of India. I'm a son of, both my mother and father were freedom fighters. I have grown up only with these kind of people who have immense love for the country, who sacrifice. So I said, whenever I get a chance in my life, I'll do something for the country. I was in US. I gave up my green card. I came back. I was in advertising, a filthy rich, amazingly great, successful career. I gave everything up. I was making commercial cinema with stars and living that kind of, I gave up everything. And today I live a life of a very ordinary man. Why am I doing this? I am doing this for the simple reason, if through my art, I can awaken young people, make them aware that your first fundamental right is right to truth. Unless and until you have right to truth, whether it's a BJP government or Congress government, damn with it, whoever is there. The government of India, the institutions of India must tell you the truth. And if you don't know the truth about the first prime minister, second prime minister of this country, how will you know the truth about anybody else?
True.
That was my intent. And which is why I made that film. Now my next film, which I'm making, Kashmir Files, the whole theme is right to justice. And I'm not going to stop. I'm going to pick up these fundamental rights of a human being and liberty and freedom of speech. So coming back to Tashkent Files, the film was about right to truth. That is the theme of the film.
Right.
Shastri is just a device. It's an interesting story. And the thing is, opportunist, why? Shastri doesn't suit BJP. Shastri doesn't suit RSS. Shastri doesn't suit Congress. Shastri doesn't suit, he's the most political figure who is like nobody cares about. If I make on, say, Subhash Chandra Bose, oh my God, Bengali community comes along with you, anti-Congress people come with you, anti-Nehru people come with you. With Shastri, nothing happens.
Exactly. So that's what was my amazement, that this person is probably the most neutral PM in the history of India. Nobody really, everyone respects him. Nobody really rallies for him. Nobody really opposes him. And yet a furor when somebody tries to put a story out about him. Right.
Okay. So the people who actually opposed Shastri when he was the prime minister, the same people with the same ideology were also opposing my film.
Right.
And the same people oppose Narendra Modi. It's not that I'm saying Narendra Modi is the greatest prime minister or not. I'm not getting into that thing. All I'm saying is the same people will oppose anybody who comes from the roots of India. They don't like rooted people. They don't like people like me or people like Shastri or anybody who basically speaks for the common masses, who speaks for the mothers of India, who speaks for the real, genuine Indians. Because then they lose a narrative.
Right.
Then the minute they support these people, Indian values come into play. With Indian values comes sacrifice, simplicity, spirituality. And they have no control over these things. What is their control? You know, their control is on this Western style liberty and freedom, Western style feminism, the Western style constitution, the Western style justice. That is their strength. So they want to control it. That's why they love Nehru. It's not that Nehru was such a bad man as it's been portrayed today in this superficial narrative fights. Nehru was a great man. I have read his Discovery of India. He was a great thinker. He had great vision for India. And he loved India. It's not that he hated India. But he was in control of these people. And Nehru liked superficial, this Western style of concept of freedom and liberty. But if you pick up the rooted people, then freedom has to come from within. The liberty comes from within. Then you have to sacrifice. Then you have to be simple. Then you have to have Sada Jivan Uch Vichar. Then you cannot have these champagne and wine clubs. So they lose their entire ideology, lifestyle, and the money sources, which is why they are against people like me. This is why they came after the Tashkent file. They knew that since I am making it, it will... Anything Modi does today, they are against it without even knowing what it's all about. That is the problem.
Right. So do you think now with internet being very pervasive in the society, in last 5 years, India has doubled the number of internet user, a lot of different alternative mediums have come through. This control is somehow breaking. People are on the local platform making a lot of different kind of content. The stories are coming out, which would not be told earlier. And even if they're not coming out, a lot of people are asking for those stories. Do you think that shift is happening now?
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. And for this, I would like to give credit to Indian Prime Minister. You know, he made it fashionable. He empowered people. He made people realize that you can use this medium for victory. If he had not won 2014,
right,
people wouldn't have been empowered thinking that, yes, you can win it. So at least people now are telling their stories. Now, let me give you a recent example, which is Maharashtra. Now in Maharashtra, with this tyranny of the government, when they sent cops to my house to shut me up, then they demolished Kangna's house, and then they arrested Arnab or whatever. Now, if without this tasting blood of victory through social media, everybody would have shut up.
Right.
But people use social media we kept fighting. Ultimately, Uddhav Thackeray's government had to concede. And which is why the High Court and Supreme Court have also told them that they were wrong or whatever the decision came. I have not studied it. So now at least people are listening to these stories. People are telling these stories, which is a good sign. But there is a problem. The problem is that somewhere... typically, middle-class Indian people don't know how to build stories, how to create a narrative. You know, creating narrative depends on the products you create. So what is happening? People come, tweet, post something, they blah, 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 and they outrage and then just go away. You know, and that's what I don't agree with. I think people should, and that's why you see in last 6-7 years, I've created so many films, short films, books, articles, because you have to create digital footprints. In modern times, the info war and the media war has to be won by creating digital products. You know, and that's where I run a foundation called I Am Buddha Foundation, where we are trying to empower, finance, sponsor, give scholarships to young boys and girls who create products.
Right. So on that note, so yes, social media has helped and a lot of people have come forward, but the presence of OTT has also kind of given a reinforcement channel for the mainstream narrative that was there to be driven home and to a very large audience, right? So good thing is that we also see a massive opposition to that. A lot of people start questioning that why my state is shown in this light, and do you guys think that we go around shooting people? And somehow, and it's my personal observation to be honest, somehow there is a very template material that has been created that in UP you have two gangsters and people are just going around killing on the road, and that's the best kind of OTT creation that is coming out of the mainstream. You pick a major city and the story is again just of a crime, that a major crime happens in that city. So again, do you think that these channels have also been actively trying to push one kind of narrative and we do not see any nuance there?
More than nuance, I would say there is no diversity there.
That's true. I mean, that's the first. And second, even in the narrative that you're putting, so I'm not countering that there is no crime happening in the city. It's happening. But when you're putting a narrative, you are somehow trying to create a scenario as if these are not very nuanced, very complex situation. It's a very simple thing that people are just criminal minded and these people cannot do anything else other than killing.
So you have to look at it like this, you know. First of all these OTT platforms are Western platforms. They're not Indian platforms.
Right.
Okay. And since I know and I deal with them directly, so, And most of them are leftist platforms, you know. And I'll give you one example for the Kashmir Files, one of the OTT, one of the largest and number one OTT platform invited me. And so I'm making this thing on Kashmir genocide. But they told me that they were very keen to take this thing on Kashmir genocide, but they said I cannot use the word Islamic terrorism. Okay, I said, but then how do you make this? Because it actually happened. It's like you are saying that do a film on Holocaust, but don't use the word Nazi.
Nazi, yeah.
How is that possible? So they said, no, but then you blame both the sides. I said, what is both the sides? How can you blame the victims? They said, no, then because other side people have also died. So I said, okay, during the Holocaust, lots of Nazis also died. What do you do with that? Now the thing is, so ultimately I walked off and we did not do it for them. And now I'm doing independently with Zee Studios. So what I'm trying to say is that they have a certain mindset. They believe that Hindus, and I'm not that kind of what people would like to, after listening to this, they would like to label me. I'm not that. I'm a very, very open-minded person. And I don't get stuck into all these things. But they come with the mindset that Hindus are regressive lot. And this is the truth. They think we are full of superstitions, taboos, and we are tribal kind of people. And they come with the mindset that minorities are oppressed and exploited in this country and marginalized in this country. So when you have this kind of a prejudice, then ideologically, you are just picking up and promoting certain kind of filmmakers. And who are these filmmakers? These are the filmmakers who themselves call themselves woke, liberals, seculars, leftists, communists, whatever they want to call it. But they definitely do not call them ever Indians, Bharatiya, nationalists, nothing of that sort. Okay, so definitely there are different kinds of people who have no emotional connect with India. And 99% of them have not even seen India. They don't even know India. Now, having said that, this is the kind of a background. Now you tell me something. When India got the first opportunity to make the first OTT show for Netflix, why did we make Sacred Games?
I was indicating. So when I asked that question, I was indicating on that why
did we make a show which is full of perversion and not a show which is rooted in Indian story? Mexico made Narcos. Every country, when they get an opportunity to make any OTT show for Netflix, let's say if Netflix is the king of all the OTT platforms, then what do they make? They make stories of their own country. Even if they have to make crime movies or they have to make on social injustice, they make it about social injustice of their own country.
Yep.
Now, if Mexico has to make on drugs, it's the problem there. India does not have a cocaine issue like they have Colombia and all these countries.
Right.
India is not as pervert as shown in Sacred Games. So they picked up something because the makers of that show were highly influenced by Narcos and they wanted to compete with those people and not with Indians. They didn't care about Indians. They have nothing to do with Indians. Now, let's say Mirzapur you were talking about. Yeah. Now, nobody in Mirzapur cares about Mirzapur. You go to Mirzapur, they don't even care about it.
That's true.
And now these days we are making all these kind of perversion. And I'm on the board of CBFC and I get so many people call me, send letters saying that why don't you regulate OTTs? Now the thing is, OTTs aren't regulated and I'm against any kind of state regulation. I personally am against it despite being in CBFC. But the problem is that the makers who are making it and the people who are commissioning it, people who are sitting in these OTT platforms, you make a list of all the names. They are all leftist, communists. They are the people who have openly supported Shaheen Bagh movement. These are the people who stand behind Free Kashmir people. These are the people who support Arundhati Roy. So now answer is very clear. Why are we making what we are making?
Right. I'll move to Kashmir files with a question from Gautam. Is that why so few Indians know about the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits? And that's a very basic question, but that's a very prominent question that should be posted anywhere. It's not an event that happens centuries ago. It's not something which was a very small scale and got lost in few months of news because something better happened. This probably is one of the biggest event that happened in last 20, 30 years in India. And it remained in news. And Kashmiri Pandits or people in general are not a very small, obscure community that you never heard of them. They run successful business, they are in successful position across the country. So you know this community. It's a recent past. Still very few people know about genocide events.
Okay, I have something very interesting to tell you. I always believe that, yes, socio-politically, I'm very aware because I keep reading a lot, I listen a lot. So when we decided to make this film, we said, okay, let's, since Government of India failed to do these war testimonials of all the victims and their families, we should do it. So in our mind, we formed a tribunal and we said, okay, we'll go wherever these families are there. And we'll do a video recording of uninterrupted, unedited recording of whatever they have to tell about this thing, genocide. So we travel all over the world. In fact, I met Gautam at that time. I was in London last year, same time actually. So you won't believe it, for almost 3-4 months as we interviewed these people in US, UK, Europe, South Africa, India, Jammu, Pune, Bangalore, wherever in the world they are. You won't believe it, for those 4-5 months. Towards the end, I couldn't see because my eyes were swollen like this. I kept crying 7, 8 hours a day. When people were talking, and those are on video, when I make the web series, you'll see people are talking and I'm crying non-stop. Why was I crying? I wasn't crying because I was crying because people were killed and that somebody is telling me my father was cut into 50 pieces, or somebody is telling what happened to his mother or daughter. That's not why I was crying. I'm a filmmaker, pretty mature enough. So such deaths and killings I have seen and read, and I know a lot about it. I was crying because I was feeling, it was self-pity. I was feeling so guilty. I was feeling so ashamed that how come I didn't know about it. And that feeling, in my entire life, I've never felt that emotion. Never ever felt that emotion. And I can guarantee you, when my film comes, you'll realize even you have not felt that emotion. This is a very strange emotion. It's such a strange emotion. It feels like that you were in coma. When you know that you were not in coma, and suddenly you wake up and somebody says, this is what happened to you. You say, oh, no, nothing happened to me. I was fully awake.
Right.
It is such a, I can't tell you, there's nobody telling you that you failed. You realize that it was happening in front of me and I didn't know. Right. So why didn't I know? Why didn't I know? I didn't know for 2 reasons. A, the state in a very systematic manner denied it.
State doesn't want you to know.
State didn't want you to know, because then state looks like a failure.
Yeah.
And let me say it very openly. Even today, the government, the UNO, has given it a status of a semi-genocide. And the semi-genocide because Indian government has not called it a genocide. Till date.
Right.
And there is no war testimonials. There are no genocide testimonials. Nobody has gone and reported how many people died. There's not even one FIR. Not even one person has been arrested. Bitta Karate, his interviews are available. You can see it after this interview. Openly, he says that he has killed 20 people. He can kill his mother. You see Yasin Malik's interview with BBC Hard Talk or whatever show was that. In that, he is confessing to killing Air Force officers. What has happened? So there is no justice. Second thing is, nobody even once tried. Everybody has used Kashmiri Pandit issue every 5 years to get some votes here and there. But nobody has tried to resettle them.
Right.
Even
Right.
after 1.5 years after the abrogation of Article 370, there's not even one attempt to resettle them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can guarantee you it's not going to happen in long, long, long time. You know why? Because they are not a vote bank.
True. True.
So that is the tragedy of a democracy. If you are, they are the minority of the minorities.
Right.
They are the minority of the minority. They were just 2% when the genocide happened in Kashmir, and they used to be 100%. Kashmir, the Hindu population was 100%, but
Yeah.
by 1947 it was 5%, and by 1990 it was 2%, and today it's almost 0% or 0.1% or something like that, as negligible. So we have lost Kashmir in a civilizational war. Geographically we control it, but we have actually lost Kashmir.
True.
And that's
If you
where
put
the
in that
tragedy
perspective.
lies. That is the tragedy, that nobody knows that India has lost Kashmir.
Right. And on that note, I'll circle back to where we started, is that recently we had a movie made on Kashmir, Shikara. And that's the very point I started this whole discussion with, is that the way we tell our story, somehow the crux of the story or something which should be the major point of the story becomes a backdrop. Like when Shikara came, Kashmir was incidental. It could have been a love story in any kind of tragedy in any part of the world. It didn't have to be that genocide. It could have been a bomb blast somewhere. It could have been a war somewhere, right? So every time we try to tell these stories, somehow we just use them as a backdrop, and then we whitewash certain part of it. Like everyone got hurt, everyone was at fault,
Yeah.
feelings were hurt, so or the socio-economic conditions were bad, hence the events happened, and it was everyone's mistake. That needs to change, and how we have to bring that change.
Yes, that movie I wouldn't like to comment on it because then it sounds political. But yes, that
Yeah.
was made by leftists.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was made by communist people with leftist mindset, and leftists have a great, very clever strategy. I mean, one of the finest strategies, and I envy them for that. What they do is they neutralize and dilute the argument in such a romantic manner that you will never even understand what's happened. They'll talk about love, equality, human rights, compassion, empathy, and these kind of things which you can't even fight. They use
Right.
women and children as shields. What they
Mm-hmm.
did in Shaheen Bagh, what they were doing in America recently in riots,
Right.
they use them so beautifully, so you can't even attack them physically. They will use feminism as one of the weapons, and they're
Mm-hmm.
smart with that, And this is so that's what they try to do with this film. But the only way to do it is do not even care about them. Just go and tell your story. So with Kashmir Files, what I have done is it's not my story, first of all.
Yeah.
Okay, Buddha in a Traffic Jam was my story. Means I picked up some research and I told it the way I wanted to. Tashkent
Mm-hmm.
Files, I picked up the research and told the story I wanted to. And this time I'm not doing that. I'm just telling the story of the victims. What they told me, I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not my story. You listen to them, see what happened to them, and you figure out what happened. So why should I romanticize or get into this political argument? And that's what I'm
Right.
doing. And it's not ending there. Okay. Tashkent Files was my first series, first film in this series. Second is this. And my next chapter is again a story which nobody even will ever dare to tell. So I have decided that rest of my life, if I have to make movies, I'm going to tell the stories which nobody is going to touch. If nothing else, there'll be debate around them, and people will say, okay, what I have shown is wrong, propaganda,
Yeah.
opportunism, whatever you want to call. You come with your
That's
best. Now,
true.
Tashkent Files, everybody tried to shut me up. The critics refused to review the film. They refused to release the film, but it ran for 100 days. And till
Right.
date, not even one person has come with one criticism of the film.
That's true. That's actually true. Yeah.
Right? So Kashmir Files, if this OTT platform which told me every time you say one Hindu was killed, you have to say one Muslim was also killed, let them see the film. I'll ask them, now you tell me what you think.
True. True. So
Right?
on that note, Vivek, in favor of time, we'll move towards closing, and I have a few comments and questions from people. So I'll just read them out to you. Devi Mishra says, right, you are. The communists have destroyed Indian culture and heritage. But my question is, how can we rewrite and restructure our own culture? History has to be rewritten to get rid of the so called greats like Akbar and Nehru. If anyone speaks against them, he will be called seditious or anti national and will be thrown into the prison. Look also the way Gandhi is portrayed in the history books. One is led to believe that Indian independence was achieved by Gandhi and his blind coterie only. What about the contribution of millions of people? What's your take on this?
Um, See, people like to remember stories, and
Mhm.
the stories are not necessarily they come from history books. Okay, stories also
Yeah,
come from what your grandmother has told you, what your parents have told you, what your friends have told you, what your teachers have told you, what your girlfriend has told you, or what is the gossip around it.
or
So,
memory also gets kind of shaped by what you start believing yourself. So you start
yeah,
getting in an ideological line, your memory starts believing
yeah,
things
yeah,
that,
yeah,
yeah,
selective exposure, selective retention, and all those kind of
right.
things. So now Gandhi word has been hammered into our minds so many billions of times, millions of times, that it's very difficult to get rid of it, at least in our generations.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so I'm not going to fight that, because fighting that would be not a very clever political strategy or communication strategy.
Hmm.
Like Ambedkar. Now Ambedkar wrote the Constitution of India, and
Right.
it's been hammered for political reasons so much that we nobody in this country knows that there were 15 women who were part of the committee which wrote the Constitution, right? Even the
Mhm.
champions of feminism never ever mentioned that 15 women also wrote the Constitution of India. The same communists who exploit Ambedkar and all these people, they don't mention this. So what
Right.
happens is, when you hype up something so much or somebody so much, you somehow are doing injustice to lots of other
The
people
rest
who
of
are
the
part
people.
of it,
True. True.
their contribution, you know. And the same mistake I tell the current narrative builders, don't make this mistake. Don't make it around one person so much that you do injustice to thousands of people and lots of other great people who are doing great work. So
Mhm.
I'll tell you, whoever has asked the question, I'll tell you what is my formula for changing the narrative, which is, you assume this responsibility that you are a narrative builder. Narratives will be built by millions of stories, not one story. Holocaust today is remembered by the world because there are thousands of films, documentaries, short films, literature, books around it. Everybody would have forgotten about Holocaust. There have been so many tragedies in this world, nobody remembers it.
True.
The modern generation doesn't even know about the atom bombs, Helsinki and Nagasaki atom bombs. The modern young boys and girls don't know anything about it, the millennials, because there aren't so many millions of stories around it. There aren't so many films around it, but so many thousands and thousands of people died. So what you have to understand is that to build a narrative, you have to create millions of stories. And millions of stories can be created by millions of people.
Right.
And luckily, we are billions of people. We are more than a billion people. So
Right.
what I say is, you tonight take a pledge that for next 1 year, I will write 365 stories. I will not sleep any day without writing a small story on my social media or on my WhatsApp groups, but I'll write one story. And that story doesn't have to be about Gandhi or Nehru or Bose or Ramayana, Mahabharata, and great people. That story has to be about you. That story has to be about your mother, the sacrifices of your mother. That story has to be about your local history. What is in that place where you were born? That story has to be about your own culture, your own food, about your things. You plant so many stories around about you that slowly the entire ecosystem is filled with only our stories. Otherwise, when you won't do that, these people will keep planting stories, anti Shastri, anti Savarkar,
Right.
anti Rama, anti this, anti that, and they will create anti India stories.
Right. Shripati Upadhyaya is asking why there are not many movies depicting history of Hindu civilization, glorifying Hindu rulers such as Raja Daher of Sindh. So I think we discussed this at length in the
Yeah, we
beginning
did.
that
We
there's
did.
a coterie and there's a clique which controls most of the what stories goes and what narratives are told, and probably with indie filmmakers and individuals coming in and putting stories out, or probably a demand generating because at the end of the day it's also a business that people are running. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'll quickly look through some other questions. We are very tight on time now. Uh, Gautam again asked similarly, very few Indians know about the plight of Hindus in Pakistan. Why? I assume the same reason that we discussed with genocide is that
Yeah, yeah.
want to create that narrative. Sudhir Pandey is asking, hello Vivek ji, namaste. I'm Sudhir from London. I've completed Urban Naxals a couple of days ago. I do not remember if I have finished reading any book in 3-4 days. Such was the impact of this book. Looking forward to start reading Who Killed Shastri now. My question to you is, how can a positive narrative be created to counter the leftist anti-national narrative?
I just explained the only way is
Yeah.
that whatever you read, you see, write reviews of this, you have to amplify, multiply, you have to vocalize the thought. If you feel that India is a great country, then talk about greatness of India. That's what I do. I have a very simple formula. I do not care about others. In these interviews, I analyze because people ask. Otherwise, I just talk about the greatness of Hindu civilization. That's what I have taken upon myself. Similar, so when you read Who Killed Shastri, you'll find this book is about the role of sacrifice, simplicity, and
Mhm.
spiritualism in politics. And how by
Right.
using these three things we can become a great country. That's what the book is all about. So I write about the greatness of our own civilization, and that's my contribution. So you can also do that. Write about greatness. Don't write about weaknesses.
Right. So with that, we'll close in favor of time, Vivek. Thanks a lot for taking your time out and spending the Saturday evening with us for our audience in London. And thank you everyone who has joined. It was really a great pleasure talking to Vivek, and it was a really fun discussion. And I really hope to host you in another session sometime in better times in London when we could do this in person and have an audience sitting across the room and have this kind of discussion there. So
Thanks
thanks
a
a
lot,
lot.
Nilendra. Thanks a lot, Nilendra, to you and Indic Academy. And Nilendra, it was great fun talking to you. After a long time, I'm talking to
Yeah.
somebody. It's like, uh, I generally don't like sessions to go more than 40-45 minutes, but this is something, it really felt like we are sitting in London in one cafe and the night can go on and on. I promise you, when I come to London, we'll do one-on-one session somewhere.
Yes, yes,
And
definitely.
till then, all the best and my love and my best wishes to everybody in London, and season's greetings to all of you.
Thank you, Vivek. Thanks a lot. And thank you everyone for attending. We'll close now. Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.